Iroh's name usually brings smiles, warm tea, and lazy afternoons in Ba Sing Se, but history remembers a different man. Before the lotus tile, before the white beard, there was General Iroh, Dragon of the West, commander of the longest siege in recorded history. 600 days of flame, stone, and silence. 600 days that broke a city, broke an army, and nearly broke the soul of the man who once sang lullabies to a son who would never come home. The campaign began on a cloudless dawn. 30,000 Fire Nation soldiers crossed the outer ridges of the Serpent's Pass, dragging with them 200 trebuchets and 3 experimental drill towers powered by superheated magma. The earth shuddered under their weight, and the wind carried the stench of coal and sulfur all the way to the agrarian districts inside the Great Wall. Scouts reported a single banner at the head of the column, a red dragon on black silk, the personal sigil of Crown Prince Iroh, heir to the throne and hero of the Western Seas. Civilians whispered that the city would fall in a week. Veterans knew better. They had seen the prince burn a fleet at sea, had watched him tear down fortress walls with nothing more than disciplined firebending and a calm smile. This siege would be different. This siege would be remembered. Day 1 opened with a barrage of flaming boulders the size of hay wagons. They arced over the wall like meteors, crashing into market squares, granaries, and temples. Children collecting morning water vanished into columns of ash. The outer ring's defenders responded with earth discs and stone pillars, but the drill towers advanced behind rolling shields of iron and flame. From the command tent, Iroh studied the chaos through a collapsible spyglass, sipping ginseng tea brewed by a trembling aide. He noted wind speed, wall thickness, and civilian panic in neat columns of charcoal ink. When the aide asked if the prince felt anything at the screams, Iroh answered without looking up. Compassion is a luxury the battlefield cannot afford. The aide wrote that line in his journal. Years later, the journal would be read aloud at a war crimes tribunal, and the court would fall silent. By day 37, the outer wall still stood, scarred but unbroken. Earth Kingdom sappers collapsed tunnels beneath the Fire Nation artillery, drowning 2 catapults in sinkholes. Iroh responded with Order 17B, burn every rice field within 5 miles. The flames raced through paddies like living things, devouring the season's harvest and the straw huts alongside them. Refugees who had fled inside the city now competed for dwindling grain. A ledger recovered from a burned supply wagon lists the daily ration for civilians as 0, acceptable losses calculated. Iroh's signature is clear beneath the stamp. Weeks turned to months. The siege became a machine of repetition. Dawn barrage, noon drill, dusk patrol, midnight burial detail. Soldiers on both sides forgot why they fought. They fought because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the faces of the dead. Iroh's troops nicknamed the campaign the Long Tea Party, bitter humor for endless nights spent brewing leaves over guttering campfires while the city beyond the wall glowed orange. Inside the command tent, maps multiplied like weeds. Iroh annotated them with arrows, circles, and terse phrases. Civilian shield? Morale irrelevant. A junior officer once asked if the prince ever slept. Iroh replied that sleep was a habit for men whose sons were still alive. The officer laughed, then saw the prince's face, and never laughed again. Day 104 brought the first child soldier. A captured earthbender, perhaps 12 years old, was dragged before the drill towers and forced to bend coal into the furnaces. When the child collapsed from exhaustion, Iroh ordered the furnace stoked anyway. The war diary for that day reads, Efficiency improved. Recommend younger laborers. The entry is written in the same neat handwriting that would later compose the Leaves from the Vine lullaby. Rumors spread that the siege was failing. Supply lines stretched thin, desertions increased. Iroh issued Order 42, execute deserters publicly, leave bodies as warnings. On a rain-soaked morning, the prince stood in mud up to his ankles, watching a firing squad dispatch 3 teenage conscripts who had tried to flee. Witnesses recall that Iroh whispered, "For Lu Ten," as the shots rang out. The rain could not wash away the smell of smoke and copper. Day 243. A White Lotus messenger arrived under cover of darkness, bearing a sealed scroll. The contents, newly declassified, read simply, "The comet is 6 years away. End the siege or lose the war." Translation: the Fire Lord wanted a quick victory, not a grinding stalemate. Iroh faced a choice: escalate to total annihilation or retreat in disgrace. He chose retreat, but not before one final atrocity. To cover the withdrawal, he ordered a 48-hour bombardment of the agrarian zone, homes, schools, temples. Earth Kingdom records list 1,472 civilian deaths. Fire Nation archives list 0, because the term non-combatant had been redefined to potential threat. The siege ended on day 600. The army marched home under gray skies. Medals were quietly returned, reports buried, songs rewritten. Iroh returned to a palace that no longer felt like home. In the garden, he planted jasmine. The scent reminded him of smoke. He began brewing tea, first for himself, then for any soldier willing to sit and listen. The recipes carried the bitterness of ash. Years later, in a quiet tea shop in Ba Sing Se, an old man served jasmine tea to a boy chasing honor and a girl chasing hope. The boy asked why the tea tasted like smoke. The old man smiled and said nothing. Behind the smile lay 600 days of fire, a ledger of acceptable losses, and the echo of a lullaby sung to an empty crib. Redemption does not erase the past. It remembers it every morning, in every cup, until the flavor of forgiveness finally overpowers the sting of regret.